CEO's 10B challenge revealed. Janitor's unexpected response will leave you amazed and inspired. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he polished the glass conference room walls, arcane reflections glinting in the midday sun, dancing like the hopes buried deep inside him. The corporate world buzzed with anticipation, each executive abuzz with ideas for Olivia's ambitious initiative. Yet, to him, the dream felt as distant as the skyscrapers shimmering against the blue Chicago skyline. How could he, a janitor for more than 2 decades, possibly contribute to a 10 billion challenge aimed at erasing social inequality? Doubt slithered through his mind. What would the affluent executives think of his tales, his life? Would they see him for the man he was, or just the custodian who swept up their crumbs and emptied their trash? The scrutiny weighed heavier than the heavy-duty trash bags he carried. This was not just work, it was a minefield of expectations, and the fear of not belonging lured him close to the edge. Jake paused to let out a shuddering breath as a group of executives passed, their laughter echoing like a distant victory, the sound washing over him like a relentless tide that could drown his very spirit. An unbidden thought arose: what if his daughter, Mia, was right? She had stumbled upon his old notebooks filled with stories reflecting hardship and resilience. "You have a voice, Dad. Use it." Her passionate plea rang like a bell in his mind. But taking the leap felt irresponsible. Could he dare risk financial stability for a dream that seemed utterly naive? The tension knotted in his chest, gripping tighter with each passing day. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake's heart raced as he mulled it over, weighing risks, dreams, and responsibilities. An avalanche of anxiety rolled in, a fear of rejection like he had never known. Would his words matter? A twinge of urgency ignited in him. If he didn't act soon, would he allow another chance to slip from his grasp? The boardroom, a theater of ambition and grit, felt like a locked door, bolted tight to someone like him. Then Olivia spoke at the company meeting. Her expectations loomed unbearably high as she dismissed more traditional contributions. Her eyes cast downward like a hawk eyeing its prey when she mentioned the need for fresh perspectives. Anxiety flared within him, edging closer to desperation. What if she scoffed at his submission? The gnawing doubt spiraled further. The stakes were getting higher, and he could almost hear the ticking clock of opportunity striking. Jake's mind raced as questions whirled. Was he strong enough to face the inevitable judgment? Did the ambition buried under years of reflection and silence have the resilience to bloom amidst the ruthless corporate culture that often crushed dreams? The flames of determination flickered vaguely within him, engulfed in the weight of an unresolved identity and expectations. He stood at a precipice, torn between them, his yearning heart and the stalwart realities holding him back. Would he step forward or cling to the shadows? Time slipped mercilessly, yet within him lay the burden of anticipation and opportunity that could either define or destroy. The storm of emotions swirled violently, and amid the turmoil, one question persisted: who truly would listen? Jake's palms were clammy as he leaned against the polished table in the break room, his heart hammering a primal rhythm against his ribcage. Staring into his lukewarm coffee, he felt an unexpected depth of clarity. The swirling doubts about his worth and potential had suddenly become pathways leading to possibilities. The laughter of the executives echoed in his ears again, but this time, it struck a different chord within him. It was a challenge, not a threat, that he remembered Mia's eyes, brimming with belief, invoking something that had long lain dormant inside. The urgency began to reshape his thought process. Maybe he could find a contribution worthy of the slanting glances and skeptical frowns. For 2 decades, he had witnessed a world through a unique lens, one forged by the trials of everyday struggle and perseverance. That if Olivia wanted fresh perspectives, perhaps the stories and insights etched in the pages of his notebooks could serve as a deep well from which to draw. Could he weave his experiences into a narrative that resonated? Could he illuminate the hidden truths buried by the privilege of the executive suite? Ideas danced back into his psyche, pulling at the frayed edges of his confidence. Could he risk everything to speak for those who felt unseen? Feeling emboldened, he collected the notes scattered around him. Each story, each memory, began taking shape like a living entity, demanding to be told. A haphazard plan started brewing in his mind, each step resembling a risk writing a proposal that outlined his perspective on social inequality, drawing from his experiences to add depth. Was this the bridge he could build to connect his world with theirs? With a deep breath, Jake decided to take action. Before he lost the volatile spark ignited within him, he fired up his old laptop in the corner of the break room. The screen flickered to life, and the cursor blinked at him, as if urging him to begin. A cascade of emotions rushed through him. Fear mingled with excitement, as each word he typed grounded him further in his resolve. Hours slipped by unnoticed as he narrated tales of the people he encountered in the building, stories of struggle and resilience. He wrote about connections he forged in fleeting conversations, represented by the faces and struggles of his community. Each paragraph was like an unfolding bouquet, blossoming into a vibrant display of shared humanity. A sudden thought seized him: would Olivia truly read it? The gnawing uncertainty clawed at him once again. What if she dismissed it as irrelevant? The looming fear that had once paralyzed him transformed into a burning desire to be understood. Even if she didn't see his worth initially, he had to believe that his voice mattered, that if he could finally find the courage to speak, maybe others would listen too. Jake finished the document just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an amber glow across the break room. With one last review, he gathered the confidence he had been timidly nurturing and sent the email to Olivia, attaching the proposal. Each click of the mouse resonated within his heart. He felt lighter, as if he was shedding years of self-doubt with each keystroke. As he stepped away from the computer, exhilaration coursed through his veins, a thrilling mix of anxiety and hope. He had taken a leap, but a deeper dread lingered beneath the surface. Would this step forward lead to acceptance or ignominy? With every beat of his heart echoing in the stillness, he found himself questioning once more: had he truly unleashed potential, or had he simply stirred the shadows that lurked in his security? The moment felt like a harbinger of something greater, yet he remained on the edge of uncertainty, waiting to discover how the storm he had ignited would play out in the world of towering expectations. Little did he know, the real challenge was just beginning. The next morning, a tension hung in the air at the office, palpable and charged like the moments leading up to a storm. Jake arrived early, a new sense of purpose humming beneath his skin, yet anxiety surged at the thought of Olivia's reaction. As he settled into his usual corner cubicle, the reality of his submission hit him like a wave. What if she dismissed it without a second thought? The thought gnawed at him, threatening to unravel the excitement he had felt the night before. He glanced around the workspace, taking in the faces of colleagues who bustled about, their heads buried in tasks and their conversations laced with the usual corporate jargon. He felt alien, a wanderer among a tribe whose language he barely understood. His heart hammered at the idea of engaging them in discussions that mattered, not the quarterly earnings updates, but deeper narratives that mirrored his own. As the clock inched toward 9, he fidgeted with a pen, trying to quell the rising anticipation. Olivia's office door was shut, their previous chats replaying in his mind, her probing questions and relentless drive pushing him to think beyond traditional boundaries. Would she see him today as more than just the janitor? Suddenly, he was jolted from his thoughts by a loud tap on his desk. It was Mark, one of the younger executives, known for his brash confidence. "Hey Jake. Heard you submitted something to Olivia. Something thought-provoking, eh?" The mocking inflection in Mark's voice struck painfully, stripping away Jake's new resolve, leaving behind insecurities that threatened to bubble to the surface. Before he could respond, Mark continued, "I hope it's not too pedestrian." An impulse surged within him, an urge to stand up for himself, to defend his narrative. But Jake felt the profound weight of vulnerability. What if Mark's assumptions were right? He forced a chuckle instead, attempting to mask what felt like a burgeoning storm inside. "Thought I'd give it a shot," he mumbled back, avoiding Mark's gaze as the laughter of nearby colleagues engulfed him. There it was again, the added weight of judgment. But he could also feel a flicker of something else, a quiet defiance stirring in the back of his mind. Throughout the morning, instead of immersing himself in familiar janitorial tasks, he found himself at a crossroads, a mental crossroads between his past self and who he aspired to be. The clock ticked relentlessly, each second amplifying his unease. In contrast to the typical monotony of his work, he envisioned himself standing tall, articulating thoughts that resonated, stories that mattered. Just as he steeled himself to confront Mark again, an unexpected alert chimed on his phone. It was from Olivia. She'd requested a meeting, right now. The very thought set off a rush of adrenaline, both thrilling and paralyzing. Jake stood up abruptly, the echo of his trepidation drowning out his thoughts. Could this truly be his moment? The anticipation morphed into a readiness that mixed fear with purpose. He approached Olivia's office, each step an assertion of newfound identity, both terrifying and exhilarating. As he knocked on the door and stepped inside, the air shifted. Olivia looked up with a glimmer of curiosity, her brows slightly raised, inviting yet expectant. "Jake. I just read your proposal," she spoke, her tone infused with both surprise and intrigue. He held his breath as his heart raced. This was at the moment where everything could shift. Little did he know, Olivia's next words would not only challenge everything he thought he knew about himself but also push him toward a reckoning that would redefine his purpose entirely. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her gaze piercing through to Jake's very core. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation, as he searched her expression for clues about the fate of his proposal. He felt as if he were standing on a precipice, peering down into uncertainty. "I must admit, Jake," she began, a wry smile playing on her lips, "your idea was unexpected. I've taken a few notes." Hope ignited within him, momentarily overshadowing his insecurities. This was a reaction he had longed for yet feared might never come. "Really?" he stammered, surprising even himself with the weight of disbelief in his voice. "Yes," she replied, her tone shifting to more serious. "But we need to discuss some aspects of it. This is bold thinking, and it could fundamentally change our approach moving forward." The gravity of her words encouraged a rush of confidence. He straightened, determined to engage in this dialogue on his own terms. "What do you think needs improvement?" Olivia tilted her head, impressed by his eagerness. "Your strategy is sound, but it lacks depth in terms of execution. We need to consider potential obstacles, especially from within the organization." Her words struck a nerve. Jake realized he was teetering on a new edge of awareness. The corporate landscape was not just about innovative ideas but also the battles fought in the shadows. "I can think of a few challenges," he admitted, shifting uncomfortably as he grasped the implications. "Resistance from old guard employees, a lack of resources to trial my initiatives, and most importantly, the skepticism towards someone in my position." Olivia leaned in closer. "Exactly. You're aware of the hurdles, which is vital. But how do we position your approach as not just the voice of a janitor, but as a new vision for leadership?" Jake hesitated, a dilemma crystallizing in his mind. It wasn't just about executing ideas, it was about weaving those ideas into the fabric of the existing corporate culture. "Maybe I could conduct workshops. Get insights from employees across different levels." "Now we're talking," Olivia nodded, her enthusiasm compelling. "That's a brilliant starting point. Engaging them will make your plan more relatable, more convincing." He felt a swell of energy coursing through him, and for the first time, he tapped into the emerging leader within. Yet, a thought flickered in the back of his mind. Was his assent merely a response to a moment? Would he be able to maintain this momentum, or would he falter under scrutiny and expectation? "Jake, if we align this vision properly, we can present it to the executive committee," Olivia announced, her eyes gleaming with determination. The weight of her words sunk in, flooding him with exhilaration and terror all at once. "Me? Presenting to the committee?" "Of course," she affirmed. "Your journey is an integral part of this narrative. Your voice will resonate beyond these walls, and we must capitalize on that authenticity. The prospect trembled through him. It was this very authenticity that made him fear Mark's judgment and the challenges that lay ahead. What if I fail to deliver? What if they only see me as an outsider? That's the danger of thinking like that. Remember, you've already broken those mental barriers. Now it's time to face the committee, challenge them with your narrative. He nodded, absorbing the challenge. This would not only test his ability to communicate but also his capacity to redefine himself. As he emerged from the meeting, a newfound determination surged as the obstacles ahead transformed from daunting walls into goals to overcome. However, his heart whispered doubts: could he really shift perceptions entrenched for so long? The committee's scrutiny loomed, a reminder that every step forward could just as easily lead to failure. In that moment of reflection, he knew the next steps weren't just about convincing others but proving to himself that he was capable of the extraordinary. The path ahead was unclear, yet urgency surged through him. As he stepped back into the vibrant life of the office, his mind raced with the realization that he was not only on the verge of presenting his ideas but also unearthing the strength within that had long lain dormant. And then, he felt a spark of awareness. The committee meeting would arrive faster than he anticipated, but the question lingered: would he rise to embody the leadership required of him, or would he retreat into the shadows he had finally begun to escape? Jake stood at the threshold of potential, ready to face these new challenges as he headed toward the looming meeting. The stakes had never felt so high. Jake settled into his desk, the vibrant buzz of the office surrounding him, but he felt isolated in a whirlwind of thoughts. The enormity of his next challenge weighed heavily on his shoulders, transforming excitement into a tight knot of anxiety. How would he harness his newfound confidence and propel himself into a leadership role when the path ahead was paved with doubt? Determined, he opened his laptop. The screen flickered to life, and he pulled up the company's organizational chart, a visual representation of power dynamics. The bold surnames listed intimidated him as if each represented a towering obstacle. But Jake realized this was his moment to disrupt the status quo. He set to work brainstorming ideas on how to bridge the gap between the executive committee and the frontline employees, a concept that resonated with Olivia's encouragement. His first thought was a series of workshops, sessions where employees from all departments could share their insights and feedback on his proposed initiatives. This would create a strong foundation of trust, empowering the very people who felt alienated by top-down approaches. He envisioned colorful handouts, an engaging presentation, and an open floor for discussion. The idea of facilitating these discussions filled him with purpose. He could foster the collaboration he had always craved, yet, as he drafted his first workshop outline, an uncomfortable realization hit him. He had never conducted a workshop before. The thought of standing in front of colleagues, some of whom were years his senior, made his stomach turn. He questioned his authority and credibility. Perhaps Olivia's faith in him was misplaced. How could a janitor, spending days mopping floors and cleaning offices, effectively lead discussions on innovation? With those anxieties churning, he recognized a turning point was at hand. He had a choice: succumb to overwhelming self-doubt or find ways to leverage his unique position. What if he framed his experiences, his distinct perspective, as someone who understood the company from the ground up? After all, he was someone who observed the daily grind and detected the pain points that executives often missed. The clarity of that thought illuminated a path forward, one not brushed with titles or superiority but with authenticity and real engagement. Fueled by this epiphany, Jake reached for his phone and sent a message to Olivia, outlining his ideas for the workshops. Almost instantly, her reply pinged back with enthusiasm. She encouraged him to draft a short video to promote these sessions, something that shared his journey, his vision, and how everyone could benefit from a unified approach. As he began drafting the script for the video, excitement washed away his earlier trepidation. He painted a vivid picture of not just what he wanted to achieve but also how common ground could translate into collective growth. The act of putting his story into words forced a confrontation with his insecurities. He had faced every sweeping judgment, every sideways glance from those who saw him as merely a janitor, and here he was, reclaiming his narrative. Filming the video became a cathartic experience. With the camera rolling, he spoke not just to the viewers, but to himself. He articulated his vision, channeling his passion into a message that transcended rank and role. The anxiety that had gripped him began to dissolve, replaced by the realization that he was more than a janitor, he was a messenger of change. In the spontaneity of his delivery, he found a boldness he hadn't known he possessed, stirring hope within him, a hope that may soon culminate into something extraordinary. With the video completed and a tremor of excitement coursing through him, he prepared to share it the next day. There was no retreating now, he was committed to this path. As he turned off the lights in the office that evening, satisfied with his day's work, a flicker of doubt danced in the back of his mind. Would the committee embrace his narrative, or would they cling to preconceived notions, unwilling to see beyond his title? Jake realized he would soon be faced with the most significant confrontation yet, the moment where he could shift perspectives not just for the committee but for himself. The anticipation of that challenge both thrilled and terrified him. He stood on the edge of becoming not just a proponent of change, but a catalyst for it. And he could no longer ignore the whispers of possibility growing louder in his mind. As he stepped outside, ready to embrace what came next, the world seemed to breathe with him, filled with the electric potential of unforeseen outcomes. Would he seize the moment, or would he shrink back into the shadows as he had done before? The answer awaited him as he turned his gaze towards the horizon of tomorrow. Jake awoke the next morning to a cacophony of thoughts. The video he'd crafted flickered through his mind like a vivid dream, underscoring the significance of the day ahead. He could no longer pretend he was just an observer, his voice needed to resonate within the company's walls. Each moment stretched as he moved through his morning routine, the warmth of the sun streaming through the window a stark contrast to the cold beads of apprehension forming on his brow that he arrived early at the office, the stillness of the empty hallways amplifying his racing heartbeat. He positioned his laptop on his desk, the brightly lit screen serving as an echo of the potential that lay ahead. Would his message cut through the echo chambers of corporate indifference, or would it drown amidst the whispers of skepticism? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sharing the video felt monumental. Would his peers support this initiative, acknowledging the insight someone often labeled just a janitor could provide? Or would they reject it outright, their perceptions etched in stone? A wave of nausea surged through him. Jake took a deep breath, forcing himself to distance from the looming specter of self-doubt. Gathering his resolve, he pulled up the video file, reviewing it one final time. Each frame displayed a reflection of his growth, a visual testament to his journey. In moments of clarity, he heard echoes of Olivia's faith in him. The purpose behind the workshops was not just to eliminate the chasm between departments, it was a movement toward a more unified workforce, one where every role was valued. With a determined click, he pressed send on the email to the executive committee, the screen freezing for a brief moment that felt like an eternity. He took a step back, allowing the excitement to flood his senses, igniting a spark of adrenaline to push aside the lurking despair, but as the day unfolded, he found himself tangled in the reactions that began pouring in. The committee's initial responses arrived one by one, some enthusiastic, some tepid, and others, unfortunately, dismissive. Each email stung. Jake could feel his resolve beginning to fray. How could he engage as a leader, grappling with the very attitudes he aimed to dismantle? If he was to connect with the employees, he needed to arm himself against this wave of resistance. Hours slipped by as numbers grew on the chalkboard of Jake's mind. He scheduled a meeting with himself, a time to strategize and rehearse the key points he thought would resonate with employees. His passion for the workshops needed to be palpable, a loud and clear battle cry against a culture focused on hierarchy rather than collaboration. In the background, the incessant hum of the office distracted him, just enough to breed frustration. He wrote down the questions he anticipated, forcing himself to confront them head-on. What if they questioned his authority? What if they didn't take him seriously? The uncertainty gnawed at him like a persistent itch, but then a thought blazed through the haze of anxiety: what if he used this doubt to fuel his message? Each skepticism he faced could serve as a stepping stone rather than an obstacle. He could turn these potential confrontations into his narrative of resilience, showcasing that it wasn't about titles but ideas and experiences. Eagerly collecting his notes, he envisioned the workshop sessions not as formal events, but as dialogues, a platform where everyone could learn from one another. In that revelation, Jake began to see those towering names in the organizational chart as potential allies, each capable of bringing fresh perspectives into the discussions. The moment was electrifying. His fundamental fears were transforming into actionable strategies. Fueled by this newfound clarity, he picked up his phone, dialing Olivia. Their conversation sparked fresh energy, her enthusiasm renewing his sense of purpose. Together, they devised methods to visually integrate feedback loops, inviting more voices into the fabric of the company. As they brainstormed, Jake understood it wouldn't be easy, but what mattered was how he reframed his own narrative and encouraged others to do the same. The journey was no longer solitary. He was inviting his colleagues to join him. With each step towards the reality he envisioned, Jake was no longer just a janitor or an employee, he was weaving himself into the potential for change. But as the day wore on and the meeting loomed closer, doubt lingered at the edges of his thoughts like a shadow. What if he failed? The weight of the moment bore down again, an impending confrontation with his own fears that mirrored the upcoming challenge of engaging the executive committee. The reminder was unsparing. The time had come to face the giants in the room, both within and around him. Would he courageously step into the light, or would he allow his apprehension to pull him back? The answer awaited him just as the threshold of potential stood steadfast before him. The minutes ticked closer to the meeting, each one weighed down by Jake's growing anxiety. He sat at his desk, surrounded by notes and an array of colored markers that represented his ideas, but his mind was a tempest storm. Clouds of fear shadowed every thought. Tentatively, he glanced at the clock, willing the hands to slow as they marched toward the moment he had both dreaded and yearned for. In the muted atmosphere of the office, coworkers passed by, their casual conversations making his turmoil feel even more isolated. He focused on a small potted plant on his desk, its bright green leaves reaching for the light. It reminded him that growth and nourishment could arise from seemingly barren places. A sudden rush of determination surged within him. He had a message, a perspective that mattered. As he organized his notes, he reminded himself that ordinariness was the birthplace of extraordinary ideas. He crafted visual aids to complement his thoughts, simple graphs and infographics to illustrate his vision of collaboration. They were designed not to showcase a hierarchy but to symbolize connection and shared wisdom. If he could invite others to see it, perhaps they would too, but doubt crept back, an uninvited guest whispering insecurities like an echoing mantra in his subconscious. He couldn't shake the feeling that behind the polished conference room doors, he would be met with scrutiny, that the very committee he sought to inspire would see his title, rather than his ideas. Resolute, Jake took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fresh ink and paper, grounding himself in the present. What if they do reject me? He questioned silently, shifting his mindset. Would that define my worth? The answer formed from the ashes of his trepidation. Rejection could sting, but it didn't diminish his insights, nor did it invalidate his growth. The conference room filled quickly, a sea of suits and ties that contrasted sharply with his casual attire. Sitting at the head of the long, sterile table was the CEO, a stoic figure radiating confidence and authority. Jake's heart raced, but as he approached the podium, he clung to a newfound sense of purpose. He opened with a story. Simple yet impactful, he recounted a moment from his early days as a janitor, describing the interconnectedness he observed among employees, the unseen collaborations that unfolded beneath the surface. It was there he saw fractures in communication that his workshops aimed to heal. The room shifted slightly, those who had rolled their eyes now leaned in, curiosity replacing skepticism. Jake transitioned into the core of his presentation, aiming to challenge the traditional paradigms that often stifled innovation. Each slide he presented illustrated the potential locked in collaboration, emphasizing that leadership didn't wear a single face, it thrived in an ecosystem of diverse experiences. But in the midst of his flow, a voice broke in, a senior executive who seemed less than convinced. With all due respect, Jake, how do you expect to implement these efforts after a day's work? The room fell silent, tension thick as Jake felt the weight of the question. The core of Jake's thoughts surged forth. Imagine an environment where collaboration isn't an extra, but part of our daily practice. he began each word imbued with the significance of the vision he had crafted. Success stems from our ability to engage, not just in meeting rooms, but on the floor, alongside one another. The change doesn't come from imposing strategies but fostering a breathe-easy dialogue where every voice contributes. Fighting to hold on to the hard-fought momentum, he pushed back against the skepticism. As he spoke, his voice gained strength, each word crafted from purpose resonating with clarity. It felt liberating to confront the question directly. He wasn't inviting rejection, he was beckoning a discourse. As Jake concluded his presentation, applause echoed through the room, a satisfying rumble of acceptance that he dared not anticipate. But as he looked around, he was met with a range of expressions. Intrigue, uncertainty, and even skepticism lingered on a few faces, the battle far from over. Standing there, Jake realized that this was just the beginning. He had set a ball in motion, but he had yet to encounter the larger forces of resistance that would inevitably rise. If business as usual resisted adaptation, what then? How far would he have to go to rally those doubtful team members? His heart still hammering, he prepared to address their questions and concerns. Would he be ready to confront another wave of skepticism? In this moment of clarity, he saw that the real work was ahead. With renewed determination, he faced the board, fully aware that this was merely the preamble to an even deeper engagement with doubt, fear, and ultimately, growth. The most pressing question now echoed in his mind: could he transform resilience into influence? Jake stood at the podium, heart racing as he faced the committee, a blend of doubt and anticipation thrumming through him. The applause had faded, leaving a void where certainty had briefly flourished. One voice rang out, a challenge that felt like a gauntlet thrown at his feet. Your ideas are ambitious, Jake, but can they truly shift culture? The CEO's voice sliced through the lingering applause like a knife. It was a direct confrontation, and Jake could feel the weight of every eye in the room now turned toward him, measuring, appraising. He fought to suppress a wave of hesitation. After all, this was the moment when he was meant to shine, to prove that a janitor's view could spark change. His mind raced. A response was required, and it had to be as sturdy as the foundations of the ideas he proposed. Culture is not something we simply describe, it must be lived and felt in the everyday. This transformation begins with each individual, he declared, his voice steadying. With newfound clarity, he invited the committee to envision an environment where every role, from the top executive to the newest hire, contributed to a shared narrative of success. The CEO leaned back in his chair, skepticism evident on his face. Jake noticed the tension in his posture, the slight narrowing of his eyes. And how, precisely, do you intend to foster this shift amid the inertia of our established routines? Jake swallowed his nervousness. The pressure was mounting, but within it lay the opportunity he had both craved and feared all along. Let us experiment, starting with a pilot program. Imagine a workshop where employees collaborate to identify their barriers, a safe space to openly discuss challenges and ideas. He spoke with passion now, each word coming from a deep wellspring of experience. What if we create innovation pods? Small interdepartmental teams that work on real projects. This would give us tangible results while planting the seeds of collaboration organically. Nods of acknowledgement began to ripple through the audience, subtle yet potent. A challenge remained in the air, however, one he could feel tugging at him. What if the top brass simply saw this as another fleeting initiative? Would they commit to something that diverged from the norm? Internally, a conflict brewed as he read the room. Jake felt the urge to appease the skeptics, to provide data-driven metrics and projections that might quell dissent. But he understood that his strength lay not in numbers, but in the real stories of those who would benefit from his proposed change. I can't promise results overnight, he continued, taking a step forward, seizing the moment. But I can promise that we'll learn together. This won't just be my initiative, it'll belong to everyone who wants to engage. Let us redefine our success metrics to include collaboration and workplace satisfaction. The board members shared glances, weighing his words and the implications behind them. For the first time, Jake felt a collective breath. Hope intertwined with skepticism hung in the air. How far could he really push this conversation? Could he evoke a genuine commitment to explore the pathways he was proposing? "All right, Jake," the CEO responded, his tone more contemplative than confrontational now. "I appreciate your enthusiasm. But enthusiasm alone doesn't drive productivity. What will you need from us to ensure these workshops are effective?" Jake's heart quickened again. A tangible opportunity had emerged, but with it came a demand for precision. "Support to collaborate on designing the workshops, ensuring that my team, the subject matter experts, are heard. Resources to select participants from all levels, so we can build a culture of inclusivity. And most importantly, patience as we start new dialogues." A flicker of intrigue lit the CEO's eyes. Challenging dynamics were forming, and they were edging into the territory of something more profound than mere corporate changes. Was he truly willing to take on this daunting endeavor? Because if embraced, it could redefine his career, but Jake knew better than to settle too comfortably. He had seen too many initiatives fizzle out in a lack of engagement, too many good ideas dismissed for the sake of maintaining the status quo. The coming days would test his resolve, adaptability, and ability to galvanize support. As the room buzzed with tentative excitement and whispered conversations, he realized the challenge before him was not just a presentation, it was a mission to influence and inspire. The question loomed larger than ever: was he prepared to fight for that change day after day? Jake stepped back to allow for more discussion, knowing the real journey was just beginning. As uncertainties and possibilities clashed in the air, another thought nagged at his consciousness: how would he handle the inevitable dissenters who might seek to undermine his efforts? The moment of action was approaching. How far was he willing to go to ensure success? Jake sat alone in the small cafe across the street from the corporate building, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, his mind racing. The atmosphere of the large conference room still lingered vividly in his memories: the glances of his peers, the skepticism from the CEO, and the whispered doubts from the committee. He had put himself on the line by introducing a radically different approach to workplace culture, and now he grappled with the aftermath of that audacious move. He reflected on his own journey. The idea of influencing a corporate giant from the ground up felt like an impossible dream mere months ago. Yet, here he was, an unwavering resolve settling within him like a weightless cloak. Now he had a chance to implement real change, to show that a janitor's perspective could indeed redefine productivity and morale, but a visceral tension gripped him. What if they all went back to their old ways once the initial thrill wore off? Jake recognized this was the moment to fall back on his instincts, not data. He needed stories, real stories that displayed how dissatisfaction permeated the company culture like a slow poison. Who better to seek these out than the employees themselves, those who lived the experience daily? An idea sparked. He would hold informal discussions with his colleagues, maybe starting with the janitorial staff, but expanding outwards. They could speak freely about their perceptions without the pressure of hierarchy hanging over them. He grabbed his notepad and began to sketch out a plan, relishing the idea of leading small group conversations that could evolve into compelling anecdotes. Jake found himself questioning his ability to facilitate these gatherings effectively. Could he create a comfortable environment for open dialogue? The knowledge that he would be asking people to share their deepest frustrations and aspirations filled him with a swirl of apprehension. But wasn't the act of listening, of creating a safe space for dialogue, itself a form of revolutionary leadership? He recalled how the CEO had subtly suggested productivity hinged on more than just enthusiasm, it hinged on palpable engagement. Reluctantly, he pushed that voice of self-doubt aside. He had faced tougher situations before. "I'm not just a janitor," he reminded himself fiercely, "I'm a change agent now." With that affirmation, he found a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than him. It was about creating a legacy that could uplift not just himself, but the very foundation of the workplace. The following day, he approached his supervisor, a man he respected immensely. "I have an idea," Jake began, cautiously gauging his response before diving deeper. He outlined his plan for informal discussions, brimming with enthusiasm. To his surprise, his supervisor nodded along, intrigued. "Why not invite others from different departments? Maybe it could expand into something bigger, something that resonates across the organization," his supervisor mused. A glimmer of excitement surged through Jake. Not only did he have the green light, but the prospect of collaboration was being tossed back to him. That night, the doubts crept in again. After weeks of inner turmoil, he felt the palpable fear of failure loomed over his head, casting an elongated shadow. What if the employees felt compelled to conform, or worse, what if they lost hope and trust in his initiative before it even began? It was a struggle against complacency and mediocrity that he now had to face head-on. The stakes were higher than ever. The narrative he was aiming to craft demanded authenticity and unwavering belief in collective perspectives and experiences. Jake felt a burning desire to prove that reverberations could start from any corner of the company, even the furthest base. Potential challenges danced through his mind. What if his idea was poorly received? Each possibility ignited a new source of tension, propelling him into a whirlwind of determination. That he took a deep breath, recalling the faces he'd glanced out at from the podium. Would they trust him enough to share their stories? As he prepared for the meetings, one simple realization anchored him: this wasn't just about implementing changes, it was about building a bridge. The uncertainty was overwhelming, but he was ready to build, brick by brick. Whatever came next would be a test of endurance, a battle against the very inertia he wished to overturn. Jake closed his eyes and envisioned the faces of his coworkers leaning in, eager to share. He was no longer confined to his old role. He had transformed from a janitor into an architect of change. But one question loomed heavily: would the organization embrace this new narrative he was attempting to weave, or would they still prefer to stay entrenched in old habits? Jake stood at the edge of a bustling conference room, his heart pounding as the executive committee took their seats. Gone were the trembling hands and self-doubt that had once shackled him. Today, he was a man transformed. Delivering his carefully crafted presentations not just as a janitor but as a respected innovator felt exhilarating. He scanned the room, feeling the weight of anticipation mixed with palpable skepticism among the executives. Today, he began confidently, we're going to engage in a dialogue that challenges the traditional fabric of our corporate culture. The words flowed seamlessly, each sentence a thread weaving the narrative of collaboration he championed. He could feel the tension shifting in the room. Curiosity was replacing doubt, even hope igniting in skeptical eyes. That he shared stories from his informal discussions with employees, real voices of frustration and aspiration. Each anecdote painted a vivid picture of an organization hungry for connection, a thirst that years of hierarchy had stifled. As he spoke, a sense of achievement washed over him. No longer was he just the janitor. He had moved mountains of doubt and crafted something tangible from his unique perspective, nothing less than a bridge between the ground floor and the executive suite. Jake launched into proposing his pilot program, the series of workshops designed to dismantle barriers and ignite collaboration. What if, he asked, every single voice in this company mattered? What if we could take the insights from our collective experiences to shape a narrative of unity and innovation? The eyes in the room communicated intrigue. For every head that nodded, the deep-seated fear that once plagued him diminished, but a voice broke into the momentum, sending a shiver of doubt across the conference table. It was Mark, the young executive who had previously mocked his proposal. Surely, Jake, these workshops could become just another initiative that fizzles out amidst corporate inertia. What's to say this isn't just theory? The challenge hung in the air, and for a moment, Jake felt that old familiar fear creeping back. But he inhaled deeply and faced Mark. The difference lies in our collective commitment, he declared. What we build together will not be another fleeting idea, it will be a catalyst for genuine cultural evolution. This is about harnessing the very essence of teamwork that everyone in this room has thrived on. A shift began to occur, a ripple of engagement as executives leaned forward, sensing the opportunity in his words. Jake presented a clear framework for moving forward. Let's create cross-departmental teams to drive these workshops. We'll integrate feedback loops, ensuring that accountability thrives, and voices are continuously engaged. Each proposed initiative resonated with the committee. Their intrigue began to bubble into support for a plan that felt alive. When the meeting concluded, a surprising mixture of applause and thoughtful conversation filled the room. Jake stood at the forefront of a sea of executives who, only moments before, had regarded him as an outsider. Social norms were beginning to shift. As he stepped out, Olivia met him with a proud smile, recognizing a change that transcended mere acceptance. It signified respect, acknowledgement, and inclusion. Later that evening, as he walked along the Chicago waterfront, an exhilarating mix of exhaustion and triumph coursed through him. In those walls, he had not only proposed an idea, he had traded fear for recognition, self-doubt for an established position, and vulnerability for authentic leadership. He could see the path forward, clearer than ever. This journey would shape the organization and him forever. Jake finally sat down in his favorite cafe, a burdensome weight of apprehension lifting as the reality of his achievements unfolded. He had proven his worth not just to the committee, but primarily to himself. He had stepped from shadows into the spotlight, transforming his narrative from one of harsh labor to impactful leadership. In the realm of corporate challenges, he now had established confidence and recognition, an authentic voice contributing towards a common future. Reflecting on his daughter's encouragement and the courage to step beyond fear, Jake had not merely participated in a project but had conquered his personal mountains. He felt fulfilled, knowing he could inspire change, standing proud and firm as a valued member of something profoundly transformative. This was his moment not just to advocate for change, but to embody it. With his heart full and mind racing towards future possibilities, he found joy in crafting subsequent initiatives, ready to dive deeper into unifying work with purpose. Now, as you've witnessed Jake's extraordinary journey, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep inspiring individuals like Jake. Comment your reactions and theories about his incredible transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.